Hey, what's up, life designers? Welcome to Intentional Tuesdays. If you caught my episode last week, you heard me talk about how I felt like I might be slightly out of my lane with the content of the Intentional Tuesday. This week is going to be very, very similar. I came across a book recently called How to Be an Antiracist by Ibram X Kendi. It's not a new book, but it's definitely a newly popular book with given the events of the past few weeks. It's really skyrocketed to be a number one bestseller, and rightly so. I'm only partially through the book, but there are a couple of concepts that have emerged for me that I think are absolutely mind-blowing. Just really, really amazing concepts in terms of the ability to actually shift the way that a person thinks about racism and themselves in the context of that subject, which is part of the reason why I feel like it is in my lane to talk about this, because it's such a powerful message in terms of its ability to shift the way that you think and the way that you behave. From a change management perspective, from a human change perspective, which is my area of expertise, it feels appropriate. But there's another reason why I feel it's appropriate for me to be talking about it, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But let's talk about the two big concepts that Kendi puts on the table here early on in the book. The first one is he challenges us to think of racism or racist not as a noun, in other words, not as the way you would describe a person to be a racist, but rather as an adjective, as a descriptor. And he really encourages us to think about it not as in terms of people, but in terms of systems and ideas. So it's true that a person might behave in any given moment in a way that would be described as racist, but he says that is a moment in time. That is something that is happening in an instant, and the real bigger picture should be looking at the systems and the processes that are underpinning or that are causing systemic inequality. And I think this is just a really powerful way to describe the phenomenon of racism, because when you think about racist as a personal trait, you either are a racist or you're not. It's really, really easy to distance yourself, to disconnect from the concept, because I think I can't think of really very many people who would proclaim themselves to be a racist. So most people would say, I'm not a racist, or I don't see color, or something to that effect. And they would basically say, look, I know what you're talking about, and I'm not that. So the problem there is it is undermining the overall effectiveness of the anti-racist movement to be able to say that. So being able to distance yourself from the problem is part of the problem. So Kendi would say that we really don't want to be thinking this in terms of people. You want to be thinking of racism as a moment-to-moment phenomenon. You might have a racist idea, or you might have a racist belief, or you might be actively or passively supporting a racist policy. And it's better to think about it at that level than it is to think about it as at the individual level. So Kendi would say that it's not about people, it is about systems and processes and ideas. And if you notice what we get very emotional about, at least what we say when we see things like the horrific George Floyd incident, we wind up talking about the people. We wind up talking about the individuals who were involved. And there's simply no question that there's something to be said for doing that. There's no question that the individuals who were involved need to be held accountable for their decisions and their actions. But Kendi would say that the bigger issue is much beyond that. And I really do think there's a huge amount of value in that first concept, that racism is not about people, it's about ideas and processes and systems that are really perpetuating and causing the initial problem that we're worried about. The second concept that really struck me as absolutely a game changer is revealed in the title of the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. So this is going to sound incredibly simple perhaps, but I think that's where the beauty lies, is in the simplicity. So Kendi says there is no neutral ground when it comes to racism. And something that I hear quite often, and probably even something that I would say that I have felt myself on many occasions, is a sense of neutrality. And it ties a little bit back to what we were talking about earlier, which is the feeling of I'm not a racist. So Kendi says, look, that is a neutral position. When somebody says I'm colorblind, or the Constitution is colorblind, or race shouldn't be a factor, and they just basically say, look, this isn't my issue. This is somebody else's issue, but not mine. I'm not part of the problem, but I'm also not part of the solution. So Kendi would say that in and of itself is a problem. And I really was struck by the power of that concept. The idea that there is no neutral ground. It's not enough to just not be racist or not have racist ideas. So Kendi uses the term anti-racist. And anti-racist is someone who is aggressively opposing racist ideas. And he really, well, he hasn't so much done so yet, but I'm assuming he will, because I'm not far enough into the book. But he hasn't really set the challenge. I guess he has, that's what he's asking us to be. He's basically saying, look, it's not enough to just not be racist. You should strive to be anti-racist. You should aspire to be part of the solution. In other words, aggressively working to call out, to eliminate, to make better the policies, the systems, the behaviors that are contributing to inequality based on race or ethnic background. So this I found to be a really useful concept. In other words, if you find yourself wondering, okay, what is my role in this racial inequality or racism discussion? What is my role? The answer is this: if you are not actively, aggressively portraying yourself, behaving in a way that is anti-racist, then you are trying to claim neutral territory, neutrality, and that simply doesn't exist. And I think this is a really beautiful concept. I think it's one that we need to take to heart. I think it's one that we really need to start to live. And as I kind of try to imagine what it would be like to make real progress on the topic of racial equality, this strikes me as being the best idea that I perhaps have ever heard, which is the idea that there is no neutral ground. If you are not anti-racist, then in a sense you are part of the problem, because you are perpetuating an already established inequality that is already ingrained and built into many of our systems and our policies. So I think this is really something worth considering, and I'm really hopeful that throughout the book, as I get deeper in, that Ibram is going to offer tactical ideas about how to demonstrate anti-racist behavior on an everyday basis, because most of us are not policymakers. So how do you do this on a regular basis? How do you contribute to the right side of this particular movement? How do we make sure that we're not trying to claim neutral ground when there is no neutral ground, but how do we advance the cause for the betterment of humanity? So that's it. I just really wanted to share those two ideas with you this week, and just put them in your mind. If you if you want to learn more, you can do so right alongside with me, because like I said, I'm pretty early in the book. But these two ideas are just so good that if the book doesn't offer anything else, it was worth the price of admission. So get the book, take this this little Intentional Tuesday, and see what you can do with it. Try to come up with anti-racist behaviors and share them. Share them with your friends, with your family, share them with me, because that's how things are going to change. And I personally believe that there is no, I'm a big believer in Kaizen, which is the idea that no change is too small. So any idea, I think, is useful, and I encourage you to think about them and share them. So with that, I hope you are well, I hope you're safe, and I wish you all the best until our paths cross again. Prosperous journey. Take care.